Drexel does consider students automatically for merit-based scholarship. That is part and parcel with the admission review. But we also really encourage all of our applicants to consider applying for need-based institutional funding that Drexel has available for students who qualify as well through the CSS profile. So as I mentioned before, Drexel does espouse a truly holistic review. My team and I back in Philadelphia are reviewing applications in great detail. We're spending a lot of time throughout the year to really review all of the aspects of the application that you see here. And especially in India, almost more than any other place that I travel and visit, we get the question, what is the minimum? What's the minimum that we need to be admitted? So, you know, we try to shift that conversation from what is a minimum to truly understanding holistic review, and really trying to educate students on how we evaluate. When I'm looking at an application, I will typically look at the student's academic transcript, their record, so whatever curriculum they're coming from. If it's a British-style curriculum, if it's an American curriculum, IB, we have students coming from all of them. So I want to see if they're taking a rigorous course load. We want to see the grade trends, how have they performed year after year. And I think what's happening most current to me is always most relevant, but we do look at the previous 3 to 4 years. Test scores, we do have some flexible options. We don't only ask students to take SAT and ACT. That is still the most common option for our students, but they can also submit a couple of AP scores in lieu of that. They can submit a couple of HL exam scores in lieu of that. If they're taking a gap year and they've done an IBDP, we will accept that for their standardized testing. A few more nuances there, but I know I don't want to take up too much time here. The essay, letters of recommendation, and co-curricular activities, for me especially, leadership really does stand out, and it does not have to be related to the field of study. It does not have to be related to the field of study. And then, of course, if we're applying to one of our design programs or something like that, there could be some supplemental materials as well, like portfolios and such. So truly holistic review.
Fantastic. Thanks, Jim. I should just say, actually, as well, all 5 of us have left our cards on the table by where the water is. If you want to grab our cards on the way out, please do so. Okay, Sheena.
The idea of our university is you don't need to know a word of Spanish to be able to study with us. The idea is once you get there, by the time you leave, we want our students to be speaking some Spanish as well as other languages. Although our students are applying to our university in Spain, our students are not bound to Spain, which means once you get there, yes, of course, you'll be learning some Spanish. You'll be in a classroom full of different ideas, thinking, nationalities, cultures. But once you get there and you're experiencing the whole world in your classroom, you will travel abroad on exchange. You could go and do internships in another country. You could learn a 3rd, 4th, or 5th language while you're over there. The idea is we're an international university that's really making sure that our students are thinking global, planning global, and already in their classroom, they've got the whole world there with them. Some of the degrees that we offer, IE is made up of 5 different schools of thought. So we have a business school, we have a school of architecture and design, another of human science and technology, a school of international relations, as well as a law school. So with our students, whether applying to one degree or a dual degree, they are on campus with students from all of these degree areas. So we want them to discuss things from different points of view. They don't have to be studying law to then go and speak to students who are studying law, or go and attend an elective or a guest speaker who is focusing on law, even if they're coming from a psychology background. Our admissions process, students can apply directly to us. They can apply via the common application. But what's really, really important for us is that we really get to know the student. We're looking for students who are going to bring something new to our university. So of course we need to see their grades to see that they can cope with our course content, that they can manage to get through the first year, the second year, the third year, the fourth year, do lots of group work, maybe set up their own companies while they're there, maybe set up an NGO while they're there. But for us to be able to see that, we want to know, as well as their grades, where they've traveled, what have they seen, how do they feel about that? The clubs and sports that they're part of at school. We want to know the languages they speak. We want to know the charity work that they're doing. All of that for us is just as important as the grades. To give you an idea, we've got students coming over from 50 different education systems. So again, the collaborative learning that happens in the classroom is immense. 70% of our students are international. So I have been sat at the back of a classroom where somebody has said, if you did this in my country, that would be fine. But if you did the same thing in another country, you'd be thrown into jail. Hear that from each other. There's always going to be a professor at the front of classrooms, but what our students can learn from each other is where we really see the magic happening. The idea is, studying in Spain, everybody on our campus speaks English, but you can walk down the corridor and hear Swahili from one side, Italian from another side, and the two students walking together to do the Spanish 2 kisses at the end of the corridor. That's what we really want to see. It's the way that we see that the world is going. We want to be appreciative and understanding of the different cultures and really have students be very aware of that from the very beginning. Making sure that students understand that they might not have traveled abroad extensively. They might not have lived in different countries, while a lot of our students do. So long as our students are open-minded to that, and then they know that this is how they might be working in the future, working at a company that has clients in different countries, or will ask them to travel to different countries, understand if you're doing exactly the same thing, but in different countries, how you would have to adapt yourself in these different places.
Okay, so I'll be really brief. Well, King's College London. It's a pretty old university. We're almost about 200 years old. We've produced about 12 Nobel laureates so far. We're ranked 7th in the UK as per the latest QS rankings. We are part of the Russell Group, which means that we are a research-focused, research-led university. In total, we have about 6 campuses now, but 5 of our campuses are literally in the heart of London. And that kind of gives us the London advantage, the so-called London advantage. Yeah, of course, we are in the service of society in London, in the UK, in the world. We have this, as an example, we have this hot chocolate society, which is a society by the students who make lots of hot chocolate for the local homeless people, and we do various other activities as well. Of course, we have a very global outlook. We offer internships in various cities in the world. We have 150 different partners in the world where lots of study opportunities, overseas study opportunities are there, and we have several global offices in different parts of the world. We are an innovative, we consider ourselves to be a forward-thinking, innovative university. We do a wide range of research from 5G technology to seaweed as an environmentally friendly sunscreen. Okay. Where admissions is concerned, yeah, it's like almost any other UK university. You have to apply through the UCAS. And once you apply to the UCAS and it is received by the UK admissions, by the London admissions office, the username and the password for the King's Apply portal is given to the student over an email. And with that, the student can upload any important documents or be in touch with the admissions office. Right? What are we looking for? We are, of course, looking for students who have the right grades, who are meeting our entry criteria, and who have a genuine enthusiasm for the subject, who may be doing some sort of research into the subject. And we look at the predicted scores, which are really very important. We look at the reference. We may look at additional test scores depending on the subject. For example, medicine, we look at the UKCAT, and law, we look at LNAT. The personal statement is extremely important, especially for competitive subjects. Why are you interested in the subject? What are the skills that you have that will help you to do well in the subject? What are your supercurricular activities? Maybe things that you pursue academically, which is not in your syllabus. We are only slightly interested in the extracurricular activities. So the personal statement is like a 75-25. 75% should be devoted on your academic interests and 25 only on your extracurriculars. Of course, we look at English language scores if it is if you're applying from the national boards of India, the CBSE or the ISC, and of course finally the standard 12 scores.
Okay, so that's a fair bit of exposition, but hopefully, as you will come to see in the next sort of half an hour or so, vitally important to understand the activity we're going to do today. So at this web link, if you've got a phone or a tablet or something, you'll be able to find a PDF. If you don't have access to it, don't worry about it, because I'm going to give you a snapshot. But on that PDF, you will see 3 pretend students. You're about to meet Pauline Pupil, Sally Student, and Tom Teenager. Completely made up. But those are 3 candidates to all 4 of the esteemed institutions here today. I will run through a little potted summary of them now, and then the fun and the learning of this activity comes from asking the 4 panellists from quite different institutions with different priorities in their admissions processes. What would you do if this was a student applying to your university? So hopefully having that snapshot of the mission of these universities and what they look for will enable you to do so. So I'll leave the link up for another 10 seconds if anyone wants to take a photo of it and can download it, and hopefully the link sharing works and you can all crash my Google Drive and find the PDF. Don't have to look at it. The guys here have all got it, so they might refer to some things. And I will run you through now the 3 students. So first pretend student we've created is Pauline Pupil. Pauline Pupil wants to study history, possibly international relations. She's an IB diploma candidate. All of the candidates I've put here are IB diploma candidates. Predicted 42 out of 45. Very strong academically. High levels in history, English literature and French, all 7s. Standard levels in music, maths and biology, 7 5s and 6. She took the SAT, got a 1420 at the 3rd attempt, so pretty strong. She got a 600 in the literature subject test, a 540 in the world history subject test. She also, if she's going to study in the US, she would need some help, some financial help from the university in order to afford those fees. Her references, in summary, talk of a very studious girl. She loves to read. She's nicknamed as History Girl. Her teachers love her. She's much more comfortable socialising with her teachers than she is with people of her own age group. Her father is a vicar. She's grown up around adults. She's had a very mature upbringing. Her history teacher says her IB extended essay was of an undergraduate level. This is a student who's already achieving a very high level academically. As a 17, 18-year-old girl, she chose to write an essay on medieval Scottish kingship. So very studious, very interested in history, doesn't have very many friends, doesn't have any other interests that aren't really history, very strong in the traditional subjects, history, English, French, less strong at some of the standardised testing things on the SAT. We'll come back to these. Tom wants to study business and entrepreneurship. For a number of years he set up his own company. It's been a social enterprise. It's a company to do with car parking and football games. He plays football. He's taken immersive Spanish classes in Spain. You can see where this is going. He's predicted 31 out of 45, so he's achieving solidly, but he's not a top 5% student. Business, IT and Spanish at the higher level, English, language and literature, biology and maths studies at the standard level. So traditional academics, book learning, regurgitating exams, he does okay, but it's not necessarily his thing. The SAT, he's got a 1440 on the first go. There's some academic content there. He's got some skills. He's 600 in Spanish, a 500 in maths. The references, however, talk about a personal tragedy in his life. His father was killed, he grew up, he took on a lot of maturity, he started caring for a younger brother, now in a single-parent household. His counsellor says he is a seriously impressive young man. One of the teacher references says this is one of the most motivated students the teacher has taught in a 30-year career. And finally, Sally. Sally is thinking about sports, psychology, behavioural sciences, communications, represents her school at hockey and netball and cross country, particularly talented at cross country. She's a school prefect, she's in the school choir, she's done outdoor ed, she's done leadership, she's done everything. She's one of these all-round people, massively involved in school life. The sort of person the teachers will not know how to replace when she leaves school. IB, 35 out of 42, so again, achieving well. Bio, geography, English, Lang and Lit at higher level. Sports science, really strong at sports science. If sports science was available as an IB higher level, which it's not, she could have taken that. Maths, started Spanish from scratch, ab initio. Has a 1280 on the SAT, took her 4 attempts to do that. Hardworking, diligent, improves, not naturally gifted academically. References speak of her as trying everything. She's determined, she's worked the hardest to make everything, to squeeze everything out of herself. Involved in every single activity the school's taken. One teacher refers to her as a change maker. Her father developed type 1 diabetes. She's taken on some responsibilities caring for him. Okay, that was very water hose. I've just put all at you. We will come back to Pauline Pupil. What I'm now going to ask to do is to go down the panellists, and we'll start with Claire and work down and say, so if a student like this was applying to your university, how would you treat them in the admissions process?
Okay, so this is a kind of an ideal candidate for Cambridge. So it's a student who she's performing very well in her exam. She's got really good academic profile and grades, is on to finish high school with very good grades. She's also really engaged in the subject area beyond what's expected of her at school. She's going above and beyond. She's going to public lectures outside of school to explore history, which is the subject that she's going to be applying to. So really a great student. Her references from her teachers, they sort of indicate that she's the top of a very talented cohort, so giving us some kind of context on how well she's doing within the school environment. We would look at her very favourably, and she would probably be on for a very good chance of being invited to interview, and then hopefully getting an offer of a place at the university.
Okay. Now, IE, how would you look at a student like this?
Okay, so I can see from here that she would definitely meet our requirements in terms of can you cope with the course content, but this student wouldn't be a perfect fit for IE. We're looking for students who are going to be really involved in the discussions. We're looking for students who maybe have done Model United Nations, who've done debate club, who are very confident public speakers, who speak maybe a couple of languages as well, especially if they're going to be international communicators, studying international relations. I have to say we don't offer history. So for me, I'd be looking at this student as potentially for international relations. The university is a small university, and the community are the students who are there. So relying on each other, hoping that you can help each other, creating new clubs, sports, charity events. My worry here would be that Pauline maybe would not be as comfortable with us, as well as her not fitting in well with us.
So just to take that step further, Sheena, if you had an application from a student like this, from what I'm hearing from you, would your thoughts be, why has this student chosen to apply to us?
Yes, for sure. But at the same time, what we're also saying is, well, we've got some information here on an application. Now, some students get to an interview stage, not all, and this is usually in the interview where we find out more about the personality. If in the letters of reference I'm already being told this student doesn't really interact so much with her peers, she interacts more with the professors, that's fine. But what I'm missing there is, well, how can a student then add to this student body in terms of the clubs, in terms of the collaboration, learning from each other, working together, teamwork? How would a student fit in there?
Okay, so your gut feeling might be that a student, even with these very strong academic results, the likelihood is you would probably deny that student a place of admission because they're not a fit for IE.
They might get to the interview stage, but yes, I mean, with the information that we have, they wouldn't be a fit for IE, and they probably would be denied.
Great. Okay, Jim, Drexel, how would you look at this student?
Clearly, Pauline is... I was a history major, so I'll say that she's blown me out of the water. I think even after my undergraduate studies, she probably has. But I think she's clearly committed to her academic discipline. Academically, and it's not only in her area of interest that she's academically strong. She's academically strong across the board. So... And a bit of background about how we begin and sort of go through the process to review. Initially, she would get a review from one or more of the members of the admissions team. And then from there, she would go to the admission committee. And typically there is an academic department representative, or at least someone from that academic unit involved in that. So giving some perspective from history. I think the history department would be thrilled to have Pauline in that department. As a comprehensive research university, clearly Pauline has taken, she's taken those steps to get involved with the local history associations. And yes, like Sheena, what does give me a little bit of pause is, she's been somewhat isolated in terms of her study. But what really stood out to me, her essay, she did talk about her father's ministry and how she grew up in the church. And it seems like she did find community in that environment. And I think she's making efforts to find that community. And I feel like she has the potential to grow outside of her academic area of interest. So to me, and one other thing that stood out to me when we're looking at teacher recommendations, what we really try to sift through are the things that we already know. So a teacher recommendation that sort of reiterates academic facts or things that we've already learned on the application itself are not very helpful, but what we do look for are things that we didn't already know. One of the recommendations, and superlatives. So one of the recommendations said that Pauline is the finest young historian that she's ever taught. Something like that really stands out to me, and I would, not only as I'm ranking various categories, I would verbally, I would note that in my comments to the admission committee and the department. So while I do think there is some pause that I'm given in terms of the interpersonal skills, I feel like there's real potential there for her to develop. And the cooperative education model that we do have does expect students to have a certain level of interpersonal skill, but given her excellence in her field and some of the other glimmers that I see, I would advocate for her for sure. So that's my viewpoint.
Jim, I just like to, you use that word there, glimmers, which is a wonderful thing. You talk about holistic review, and you've focused very in there on the reference and the essay. For colleagues in the room who may not be so familiar with those kind of things, when you're reading those things, looking at things, is that fundamentally important to your assessment of the students, is what they write about themselves?
It is, but I will be clear that if a student academically is not capable, those things are not going to sort of get them out of the hot water, so to speak. But provided the student is academically capable, we would never put a student in a situation where they would not succeed. Drexel's a fast-paced environment. We actually have a quarter system, so we have 10-week academic terms, so we move quickly. So students do need to have that intrinsic motivation, and they need to be independent learners, and clearly Pauline is that. So given all of that baseline, in my view, yes, we do look for those bits of information that speak to a student's character. They speak to something that we, again, didn't already know about them. And then as the student, goes through and articulates his or her own, I didn't think the essay was perfect from a, now, I know you, yeah.
I wrote it.
Yeah, but you're a great writer, David, I will say it. But so in looking at that, there were a couple of little things here and there with some grammar and some things like that, but I do feel that overall it was really strong. But yes, those are valuable components.
I guess what you're saying is if her academics weren't so strong, you wouldn't be able to overlook some of the other things that may not suit her.
That's correct. Yeah, I think that's a good synopsis.
Great. And finally, King's London, darling, what would you do with Pauline?
Yeah, I mean, where her predicted scores are concerned, she's meeting our entry criteria, and she's actually exceeding it. So that's definitely halfway through. If you're looking at the personal statement, I think it's a pretty strong personal statement. The things that we look for in a student, the right skills, the critical thinking skills, or the ability to do some research. These are all amply kind of presented in the essays. So it gives us a lot of information that she is actually a very, very suitable candidate for this particular course at King's.
Great. So just to summarise then, what Cambridge is saying, she seems ideal for us. We'll, if she does well in the test, we'll interview. IE saying, we'll find out a bit more, but our gut feeling is probably not. Drexel saying, she's strong academically, and that maybe compensates for some of the slight other things that we might have some concerns about, but we've seen some things about her that think that she wants to be more than she is. And King's are saying it's a clear admit. She hits the personal statement things, she's got the grades, admitted to King's.
Most likely to get an offer.
Fantastic. Great. We've got time for just 2 or 3 questions very quickly on Pauline, then we'll move on. Yes, sir.
Would it matter to any one of you, or that third line which says at the third attempt she's got this score? It doesn't matter.
If somebody's taking the IB diploma, we would look at those scores.
More than the set.
Yeah, definitely.
Yes, sir.
So just to talk about her academic bent and inclination towards academia, and when we see her essays on Scottish kingship, so clearly it shows very enhanced research skills. So was this, could this be a reason behind, for King's College and Cambridge to say yes to her, because she could be a very good research-oriented person who may, if we make an assumption now, for 4 years, 5 years down the line, may end up becoming a good history professor?
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, the first thing that we see are the grades, right? Now, she's already exceeded the grades. This is all additional nice stuff. So, to tell us that, yes, she's an ideal student, or she has the right skills. So, research skills are very important. At almost every undergraduate course, you will need these skills. And if you see her career aspiration, she wants to be an academic historian, a researcher, and so on. So if these skills are not there right now, then it would be really tough.
So as a university, you want to promote it and probably help her achieve that.
Absolutely, absolutely.
Yeah. And for Claire?
Yeah. So at undergraduate level, we're not admitting students who we're hoping that they're going to go on and do PhDs with us. That's not our primary focus. That shows that she's, a very studious student. She's very interested in the particular subject area. And like Dolan said, research skills are essential for any undergraduate degree. So that is, that's helpful to know that about her. But we're not sort of thinking, oh, she could be an excellent researcher for the university. That's not the reason why we would be interested in her. But that certainly helps, and it shows that she's really interested and engaged in that academic subject.
Great. I'm conscious we do need to move on to the students, so we'll have questions at the end, if that's all right. Go on, very quickly, Hal.
How much would her financial need affect the decision?
Yeah. And that's probably for you, Jim, really.
I think she would be a good candidate for our scholarship consideration, and given the fact that Drexel also does consider students for need-based institutional aid. As an international student, students do not need to be an American citizen or a green card holder to be considered for institutional aid from Drexel. So I wouldn't flinch in terms of my admission decision with regards to Pauline. And in fact, I think she may be eligible for a strong scholarship, provided that the department agreed with my assessment.
Okay, so Tom, we'll go a slightly different order. So Jim, seeing as you have the microphone, if you kick off. So Tom, just to remind us, the one who started his own company, he's had a personal tragedy, achieving at a good level academically, but has an awful lot of other skills, and his teachers describe him as someone who's determined to make the best of himself. So Jim, how would Drexel look at Tom, teenager?
I like Tom, personally.
He doesn't actually exist.
You did a great job. I like the guy. This is one of these cases where I think the educator and the counselor really comes out, and I think this is one of those students that spoke to me. And we do try to remove bias, but we have our own personal experiences as human beings, and sometimes while we need to be aware of those biases that we bring, right? So sometimes you can relate to a candidate. You have empathy for a candidate, and I think we all want to see the best in our students. So this is sort of where I think of Tom. I mean, clearly he's not a perfect student. I do think he's chosen the right course of study. So that is critical for Drexel in this case. We do have a specific major in entrepreneurship and innovation, and given the fact that Tom has actually taken steps, I mean, he's got his own company. He's been doing this, I think, for a few years now, the parking business, and I'm often like, why didn't I think of that? So, I think that could work around our campus in Philadelphia in some ways. So from that standpoint, given the context, and this is where holistic review, I believe, is really pushed to, is really challenged, because when we say we do a holistic review, we consider, what I call kind of a certain grit that a student has, a work ethic that a student has. And I think my colleagues at Drexel would echo that. There is some concern about the academic piece, and I'm looking to see. So the SAT scores in relation to the major, I think, are okay with regards to the SL courses, particularly in bio and math. Although what comes into play here is knowing the curriculum that the student is applying for. And Drexel is not a liberal arts college. We don't have a common core curriculum where all students are required to take, 2 years of common core. They do have general education requirements, of course, but it is unique to that program. So given all of that, this is one of those students that I would engage in some serious debate and maybe argue a little bit for. This is a student who has had a lot of responsibility on his shoulder at a very young age, and losing a parent in a very tragic way, and then also having responsibility at home with the sibling and taking that caretaker role in addition to doing IBDP. I wouldn't want to be in Tom's shoes, and to me he seems to have really exceeded some expectations in terms of his focus, and he seems to know what he wants. So I would argue for this.
And I guess from what you're saying, that you would make allowances for his grades not quite being of a level, because other things about him are going to go, well, maybe if he didn't have that, his grades might be slightly different.
I would. Our entrepreneurship program, and I mentioned the co-op before, we actually do have an entrepreneurship co-op where Drexel will provide startup funds. I think Tom he seems to be doing well in his business. Whether he goes in another direction or tries to expand this, I think there's real potential there for him. And obviously a student having an experience like that does have ripple effects through the university in a positive way. So in some regards, it's not all about how you're performing in an academic setting. Now, whether the department agrees with me or not, that would yet to be determined, but I would fight for Tom a little bit.
Great. So Dolan at King's, and knowing obviously that business at King's is one of your most competitive programs, it might, beyond medicine, might be the most competitive program. What would you do with Tom?
Unfortunately, he's not meeting our entry criteria, marks-wise as well as subject-wise. So in spite of him being a wonderful entrepreneur and his personal condition and all that, we would be focusing on grades as usual and his interest for the subject.
So he doesn't meet the grades, he doesn't get looked at.
He doesn't meet the grades, and business management is extremely competitive, as you rightly pointed out. Very little or no room for any flexibility.
Great. Okay.
Unfortunately.
Claire, I imagine we're going to hear something slightly similar from Cambridge.
Yeah, really similar for us. We don't actually offer any business programs, so his choice of study isn't really a match for our university anyway. But also his grades are quite a bit below what we would be expecting students to apply with. We do obviously take into account extenuating circumstances, so the fact that he's obviously had quite a difficult time throughout his high school, we will take that into consideration, but even so his grades are maybe quite a bit lower than what we would expect to see.
Okay, so it's a no from the UK. I.e., how would you look at Tom?
I'm really interested to see how the interview might go with Tom. Tom's grades are not bad, but they are a few points lower than our average. His maths studies grades would give me a little bit of concern, but knowing what I know about him, knowing that he's gone through a lot and has still managed to gain not only the IB diploma, but at 31, he has his own business. We at IE, entrepreneurship is part of our DNA. The fact that our students are setting up businesses, creating their own businesses, looking at things from a very innovative point of view, that entrepreneurial spirit, we want to foster that at the university. In this case, I would be very excited, as I said, to see how the interview goes. If this student was offered a place, what IE might suggest for the student is to do some courses set by us in math to prepare the student before he starts. But seeing he has a 6 in business, he's got some Spanish, IT as well. Sounds very much like an IE student, and this is where we can take a chance on students, where we can say we're a university to help you learn, to give you the knowledge that maybe you're excited about and you want to build on. This is where we can take a bit of a leap and say, okay, well, yeah, you tick a lot of our boxes, but it's now hand over the responsibility to us and allow us to help you grow.
Okay, and so this is why we call this fit. This is a student who is applying to 4 universities, all very well regarded, very strong international options, and yet applying to the right universities with the right process means that student gets a hearing, and his own skills are recognised. That both Sheena and Jim have said that IE and Drexel this would be a good student for us. He would do well on our campus. We have some concerns, but he's actually really applying for the right thing. Which very quickly for Dolan and for Claire, for Kingston came like, he doesn't meet our grades. And so for a student to understand that actually if he was only looking at the UK, the sort of university he'd be looking at would potentially on a global scale be less well regarded than maybe Drexel and IE were. And by pointing that student to a different system where his own skills are going to get a different hearing because of the way the admissions process works, the student is going to end up with an outcome that is more appropriate for them. And that's crucial when, as a counsellor, when counselling students are fit, you might meet a student who's saying, I want the UK, and you can say to them, actually, you've got a better option than if you look at another country. I am conscious we're running short of time. Are there any quick questions to ask of the panel on Tom? Yes?
It would meet the prerequisite for consideration. The score, again, we don't have a minimum set score that a student would need to have. Of course, we would take that in the context of the whole piece. So it would meet the minimum prerequisite for that program in terms of consideration, yes. And I just wanted to add, I'm thinking about, I was looking a little bit more closely at one of the recommendation letters. Something that really did stand out to me about Tom was that not only has he started this business and he has had success in it, so much so that he's hired employees. And if anyone who's in the link, you'll see that. And he's actually focused on giving jobs to people who needed that work. Those who couldn't find regular employment in the community, those with learning disabilities, those with other physical disabilities perhaps. So that's something to me as civic engagement is a core of Drexel's mission to engage in the Philadelphia community and beyond. That's also something that really stood out to me. And Sheena made a really good point about support. We do have a lot of support on campus where students are getting mentored, they're getting advised. Sometimes in a student who's got so much pressure on his shoulders, when they're sort of extracted from that situation and they can actually focus on themselves for once, they do amazing things.
Yeah, I deliver this activity in schools, and actually I'm building a website where students can log on and do this kind of stuff. I've chatted to Chuck's in here. He's got a 500 in maths SAT subject test. He's okay at maths, just not IB maths. Okay, and if I had more time, I'd delve you into it. But this is, again, the nuance of how you do this. Okay, slightly shorter time, but we are doing questions as we go, and lunch was late, and somebody spoke for quite a long time earlier, Jim. So, Sally Student, remind you of Sally Student. Sally Student is, she's just everything. She's involved in everything. She does everything. The school doesn't know how they'll cope without her. Academically pretty solid, change maker, some personal things going on. Sheena, can we start with you then? How would you look at Sally Student in I guess, behavioural science it would be for IE?
Sally sounds good from an initial point of view, but this is a case where I definitely would need to delve in a little bit deeper. With behavioural science, it's such an... it's about people. It's about... Going into sports science would mean with us, the student would have to study behavioural science and do internships, electives in sports. So I need to understand that sports interest a little bit more. The grades look okay, but completed service activities and fundraising. At IE, all of our initiatives, all of our clubs, all of our sports are created by the student. We will never set something up and say this has to exist. Anything that students are interested about, passionate about, that's where we support them. But that interest has to come from the students. Now, if all of our students are looking to somebody else for that inspiration, we don't have that ethos at IE anymore. It has to come from the students. So seeing things like that for us is very important. And sometimes when I'm looking at an application like this, and we go back to Pauline, even if there were very similar applications and maybe one student had a few grades lower but had a lot more extracurriculars, had a lot more charity work, maybe you had the entrepreneurial spirit, that would actually stand out to me, even with a few grades lower, as being more of a potential admit, as opposed to somebody who's just got the grades.
Great.
Determination, important, and yes, things like that. What's happened in your family, the maturity that comes with that, the strength, the determination, yes, it's important.
So from your point of view, you're looking, her academics are sort of bang on what you're looking for, and everything else kind of says this is a person who's going to be involved in our campus and fits our ethos.
Yes, but at the same time, if somebody's telling me in an interview it's sports that I'm looking for, and yes, we have a degree in behavioural science, and yes, through that degree program you can get to the sports area, I also want to make sure our interviews are two ways. We're looking to see if the student might be a good fit for us, but we also need to be really honest and say, actually, you know what, there's a couple of universities that come to mind that maybe you should consider. If we can't offer what the student is looking for, and that's where we get to the nitty-gritty of the detail in the interview. If we can't offer that this is also something that we need to look out for in the interview.
Great. So Claire for Cambridge, how would you look at Sally?
So I guess similar to how we looked at Tom, that it's obviously, she's obviously a very hardworking student, but her grades don't quite sort of meet what we would be looking for. As well, her sort of interests, she's not particularly that dedicated to one subject area. We don't offer anything in sports science, so she's very unlikely to get an interview with us.
Yeah, and this is the sort of person who she'd be great in the collegial system. The college would love her. She'd run the sports teams. She might be great fun to have in the supervision, but academically she's just not got that passion and that academic level in that subject area.
Yeah, and as Sheena said, we're looking, obviously, from our point of view, is this student going to fit in and do well at Cambridge? But also from the student's point of view, it's not very fair for us to admit students that we know that they're going to struggle academically and not be able to cope, when actually there's lots of other very good universities that she would probably have a much better time in.
Yeah, it's a challenge I face. You're working with independent counsellors to get into that university. Even if you got in, you're not going to stay there. It's a different thing. Okay, Dolan, have for Kings then.
Well, we have this course called BSc Sport and Exercise Medical Sciences. Now, for this particular course, she's meeting the grades, but she's not meeting the subject requirement.
That's a little bit deliberately done. So it's kind of, your offer for IB is 35, but with a 766?
665 actually. She's meeting that as well, but she's not meeting the right subject. So she has biology, geography, and something else. But we ask for biology or chemistry or physics, psychology, physical education, or maths. And she has none of those apart from biology. That will...
so she's a good candidate for King's, but unfortunately...
she's missing the subject requirement.
Hasn't had a counsellor who advised her at the right time to take the right subjects to be eligible for King's London. Perfect, thank you. And then finally...
Yeah, Sally... I think there might be an academic match, or an academic mismatch, perhaps. In looking at our programs, we don't have specifically a sports exercise, a sport and exercise science program. Some somewhat related programs, health sciences, physical therapy, but that to me, in reading the application, doesn't seem to be the right fit. Sport management, it doesn't also seem to be the right fit. So it just, in reviewing the full picture for Sally, I don't know that the fit would be there for Drexel. I am cognizant of the fact that the student is school prefect. The student is taking leadership roles on the pitch and in the school community. So there's a lot of positive there, but I think it comes down to, and also I'll just take a step back and say academically, she's okay. I would say, it doesn't sort of blow my hair back in that regard. The sports science piece, you can tell even through her written statements that she really is not super keen on the science aspect. And our programs really would probably be focusing a little bit more in that area. So from a fit standpoint, I don't know that it's there. SAT scores are average to below average, so that would factor in as well. I don't think Sally is a great fit for Drexel, but again, the department would ultimately make that call.
So
but that would be my value.
Sally's saying Viva España. The point you made there, though, Jim, about the fit. I mean, counsellors in the room, and I'm working with students at the moment who, I want Harvard, Yale, Princeton, Stanford. Well, the major you want's not offered there. I don't care. I want Harvard, Yale, Princeton, Stanford. I'm working with a student at the moment who wants business or econ. They're two separate things. And that's an important point to make there. So I'm conscious that we started a little bit late, so we've probably got about 7 or 8 minutes for questions. Hopefully that's elucidated in some sense the things. I'll put the links back up so anyone who wants to see some more materials. But we'll probably do 3 or 4 questions and then we'll hang around a little bit afterwards. So yes, sir.
as you mentioned in University of Drexel's profile, that you would see 9th, 10th, 11th, 12th grade scores, which I didn't see in the other universities' preferences. So would you consider the 4-year grades, or you would only consider the 12th grade score?
Kings would primarily look at the predicted scores.
Only the 12 predicted.
Mainly, yes.
Or the predicted.
The predicted. Yeah, I mean, yeah. I mean, if you have the scores, that's fine. But obviously, you apply by 15th.
Only for the 12.
Yes.
Yeah.
Okay, not the 9th, 10th, 11th.
No.
And the offer would be conditional on you going on to
But-
achieve those grades in externally assessed exams.
We do look at the 10th as well. Yeah, because certain scores are required at 10th, for example, maths or English or something.
We would look at that. Primarily, the important ones are the last 2 years and how that progression has gone. Correct. But we will look at them. Yes, we will.
Yeah, we're similar. So we would primarily look at the last 2 years, but we'll also look at 10th grade as well.
So you would see the 4 years journey.
We would. We would put most values sort of, working chronologically backwards in terms of what's the student doing now. Predicted scores we do acknowledge, but predicted scores, particularly in IB, there can be some difference between what the student actually scores and anecdotally. So,
That's another question.
yeah. So we don't put a lot of weight actually in that. I mean, we want to see that they're headed in the right direction, but we will look at IBDP year 1 first and see what the actual scores are. And sometimes we see a student who has not performed so well in that year, and then all of a sudden they have excellent predicted scores. How did that happen? So at Drexel, we look at actual scores, and we will start first with 11th, 10th. If the student's doing IGCSEs, we'll look there.
Just in addition to that, for example, if the prediction score is given to you, by what flexibility you would take and narrow down on the negative side? What flexibility percentage would you keep?
Yeah, it's hard to sort of put a percentage on it, but this is a relevant question because we're doing these reviews now. We were doing some of these final transcript reviews before I hopped on the plane to come to Delhi. So, and some of the cases are kind of tough. Obviously, how our approach is there is some subjectivity there. If there was a significant decline in expected grades, we would be reaching out to the student and asking for an explanation. We would also typically be reaching out to the counselor and asking for an explanation. If they didn't pass, if they didn't earn the diploma, that's a problem. Is there some extenuating circumstance? If not, that's a problem. So then the admission committee may consider rescinding a decision, but we don't want to go down that road. That's a last course of action. We really want to give the student the benefit of the doubt.
Yeah, because we had a question here, just on that one, in the UK model, just to summarise, if the student didn't meet the grades, it's quite likely, and at Cambridge very likely, that you're not going to get in. If you don't hit the offer, then that's not going to happen. Yes?
I come from school where the students are doing A-levels. So whatever the cases that we saw, they were basically IB.
Yeah.
So considering the students from our school, so what will be the eligibility criteria? Because there are different prospects.
So if I translate them to A levels, we'd be saying Pauline would be like A star, A star, A.
Yeah.
Tom would be sort of BBC, and Pauline would maybe be an ABC. That'd be the
And
good.
subject selections, like, because it's a mix.
Yeah. Translate the higher levels to the A levels. I do actually have the materials for A levels, but I wanted to have a curriculum that's pretty well understood. Okay. Yeah. Yes.
You spoke about taking LNET or the TSA for Cambridge or King's College. Now, is it mandated that the students take it, or are there only specific subjects for which they need it to be eligible?
Okay, so these are about extra tests for the UK model. If I do it very briefly, so both Cambridge and Oxford will insist on a test for every subject. There are differences as to when you might take that test for Cambridge.
I thought October was the last year.
So for LNAT, which is a law test, and for BMAT and UK CAT, there are certain dates on which you can take those set test dates, either for where you would take that in your school, or you might go to a centre and do that. For Oxford, they all happen on a date at a centre. For Cambridge, some of them happen on that date, but some of them can be done at interview or pre-interview. So, but the tests are, if the university says you need the test, you need the test, and that's another filter. I'll be naughty and say one more question, even though we're over time. Yes.
What about a student who is from the national board, that is the CBSE or ICS? So what will be the kind of approach?
So students in whatever curriculum, we could be talking about French Bac or German Abitur or any other system, South African matric, these things, the model would be the same. For Sheena and for Jim, for IE and for Drexel, and for any university offering holistic admissions, we'll be looking at understanding of, in the context of that curriculum, how well has the student done? How hard is this curriculum? We can't say, you haven't done IB, you don't get in. How hard is that curriculum? For Cambridge and for King's, for most UK universities where grades are the top, they need to see, okay, how does this translate to our A-level curriculum, our British curriculum? And they'll tell you, and you can go onto the websites and the universities, and they'll say in the national curriculum, the Indian curriculum, the South African curriculum, in the Mauritian curriculum, and whatever, these are the grades we need. And it will be the case in some scenarios where you go, the curriculum that you do in your country is not good enough. It's not seen by us as academic enough to enter our universities, and we expect you to do other things. The information is all on the internet and all on there. I will remind we have our cards here. At the nature of Ganesh coming in and telling me to shut up and go back to England, I would say thank you very much to our wonderful panellists for their time today, and thank you so much for your questions. Please do come and have a chat with us all.